Hi, welcome back to the podcast, Intimate Knowing. I am your host, Autumn Baker, and this is a different type of podcast. My husband is not here today. This has been on my mind for a few days, and it's something that I wanted to start with you all. So, when I started Intimate Knowing, it kind of came at a crazy time, and I wanted to give you more context for that. I really don't know where to begin, so have grace for me, please. So I've kind of been going through this big spiritual shift, and the podcast kind of came at the middle of that. And I wanted to give more context for what and why everything came about. I know I gave like a preliminary video, but that was like kind of scratched the surface and kind of missed the point. You know what I mean? So I don't even know where to begin. So I guess I'll just start where I know. So about like 23 years ago, about 23 years ago, I was walking with my sister through Dillard's, and she was getting ready to get married. We were walking, actually looking for my maid of honor dress because I was going to be the maid of honor in her wedding. I think I was 11 at the time. And she was going on and on about this super cool guy that she met, and it was not the guy that she was about to marry. It was actually Jesus. And she just was telling me about reading the Bible and all this peace that she was getting and all this hope. And I was a very sad 11-year-old in a very unfortunate home situation, and I wanted peace more than anything. By the way, she had moved out at this point, so if it sounds weird, I'm like, my home situation. She wasn't part of it at that moment. And so I was like, peace, I could really use some of that. I'm all on board. Let's say the prayer. So we said the prayer. I felt the shift for sure. And I started living my life as a little teeny tiny baby Christian. And not too much happened in the way of my faith. I got a Bible and I started reading it, and I started feeling some of the hope that my sister had shared. But nothing really happened until I turned 14. So about 3 years later, I met my high school boyfriend. His family attended church, a Zion Lutheran church, which, if you don't know, is a step down from Catholicism in terms of like ritual and all of that. And so I attended that. I actually got baptized in that church. And then I didn't do too much in the way of my faith until after I turned 17 and I met my husband on a plane. There's a whole podcast about that if you want to go hear that story. And that really felt interesting because it very much went against what I understood Christian morality to be, that I would find my husband as I was dating my high school boyfriend, but also just felt absolutely undeniable that this was the man that I was supposed to be with. And so I started dating my husband, who obviously at that point was my boyfriend, and we both had faith, but really weren't like walking in the way that we would consider walking in modern Christendom, at least in some circles, which is we weren't really attending a church regularly, we weren't really reading the Bible, working on growing our faith, things of that nature. And so we did start going to church together and found a lot of hope there and found community there. And, you know, as two little lost kids, I mean, he was slightly less little, but we both came from, you know, pretty hectic backgrounds. We really liked the stability of church and all the things that it brought to us. And obviously we loved God, and we wanted to be good people, and we wanted to serve others, and we wanted to do all of that. And so that was what we did, and we dated for 2.5 years, and then we got married. And then the eve of our wedding, I got pregnant with our first child, my now 13-year-old daughter, almost 14. And life just began. He was working, I was working, although when I got pregnant, or like at the end of my pregnancy, obviously I went on maternity leave, and my best friend at the time was a homeschooler. And so I started exploring the avenue of schooling, talked to my husband about it, and he agreed. So I quickly became a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling mom, parent at the age of 20. And life just started, and we just went, and we eventually had more children. 3 years later, we had my middle son, and then 5 years after that, we had our youngest. And we went through many iterations of different churches and what our faith looked like and what our journey looked like. We attended lots of Bible studies. We taught Bible studies. We got very, like, I don't know how to explain this other than we really searched for perfectionism in Christianity. We started attending a church that we really believed in, that was as close to the heart of Christianity as we felt that we would ever find. And we really loved that community. That we really did yield a very transparent, open, supportive community that we really, really loved. But through it all, my darling daughter, who is a true Spitfire, who is absolutely holds the convictions of who she is very strongly, just could not get on board. And that was very hard for me, who was seeking perfection in Christianity, to really face. And it took a lot of time before I kind of was able to see her perspective. And that really only happened in the last 6 months or so. Okay, now we're caught up a little bit on that whole journey, right? Going back again a little bit, I mentioned I had my last child. It was in 2020, so he's now 5, almost 6. And it took until he was about 5 that I felt like I could breathe and like be a human again. And around that time, I was unhappy, depressed, feeling like a shell of myself. I was serving and doing all of these wonderful things and getting to do all these wonderful things, but really just not feeling very aligned with who I really was. And why would I? I had been parenting the hardest that I possibly could and choosing the hardest route that I possibly could in a search for perfection and, all the things that we do as women. And so I decided one of the things that I was going to do is I was going to lose weight, because I was pretty overweight. I was over 200 pounds, which isn't crazy, but it was not healthy. And I was starting to get sick every night from my eating habits and just my general health. And so I decided I'm going to start losing weight. And so I had no idea. Well, I sort of had an idea how to do that, but much like everything else in my life, I really chased perfectionism the last time I had lost weight. And so after I lost the weight, I gained it all back plus some. We all know that story, right? And so this time I was like, no, I really want it to be different. And so I started reading the book Atomic Habits. I didn't start reading it, I read it. And I implemented what I learned. And my neighbor is doing gardening, that one, landscaping. Hopefully it's not too distracting. But I started looking at my habits and changing them so that I could yield the physique that I wanted, and I was able to attain that. And that just kind of like spiraled into a lot of other things. And among them was about a year ago. That was probably about 2 years ago. About a year ago. Was it? Yeah, I think so. I think that was the start of that journey. And then about a year ago, I was falling asleep, and I had been spending the whole day thinking about a season of my life where I felt very powerful and aligned, and thinking about why that was and why I hadn't felt it in a long, long, long time, and was trying to figure out what that was. And in my Christian framework was like, well, was I just living in my flesh at that point? Was I just, I think that was my main question was I just living in my flesh, and that's why that season felt so good? Was it like sinful to feel that good? And I kind of like came around and I was thinking about it, and I was like, I don't think that was sinful. Wouldn't that be crazy if God wanted you to feel miserable all the time? And so I started having like this dialogue in my head, and I fell asleep having that dialogue, and I got like what I can only really describe as a download. Now, I'm not super woo-woo. I don't know what it was. I just know that as I was falling asleep, I started getting all of this wisdom that did not belong to me before about power and what power was. And that season that I was thinking of, the reason why it felt so good was I was living inside my power, like what I was meant to do, very aligned, very powerful. And it was such an amazing season. Like I really got literally everything I wanted in that season. I was incredibly successful. I met my husband. Like it was a great season. And I started getting all this information about power and about how control is the counterfeit of power, and how power shows up in our daily life and in our sexual life and in all these different ways. And even like biblically holding up that concept of power, and how I had misunderstood it previously, and how I was like gaining this new understanding of it. Like all this, it was so like crazy that I like got up and I started writing down everything that I was learning and that I was thinking through. And it was really cool, and it started shifting things, but I didn't really do anything with it because, what do you really do with that information other than just kind of let it simmer? So that happened. And then almost a year later to the date, which is kind of crazy, something about February, I guess, I had this like sneaky little thought that I didn't really want to acknowledge at the time. And I forget exactly what the catalyst was, but the thought was, when was the last time I had an original thought? Like actually thought about something, like something happened in my life and or a concept was brought up and I actually thought to my own self with my own power, intuition, what I felt about that. And it happened, and I quickly shoved that back down, and I was like, that feels like a dangerous thought for a Christian woman, and I don't think that I should encounter that. I don't think that I'm ready for that thought. So I shoved it back down for like 6 months. And when I finally did start to like open it up and look at it, I discovered never, not in my entire adult life. And yeah, I hadn't really thought about anything. And I had been using Christianity as a sorting hat for my thoughts and ideas and topics that came up to me that, I would encounter, and I'd be like, well, Christianity says that's bad because of this reasoning. And so then I would just, leave it there, leave it in that category and move on with my day. Not with everything, but with a lot of things. And I think part of that was because Christianity really served as kind of like my framework, obviously, but also just sort of like my survivalist mechanism. I was 20 with, very little life understanding, married with kids, and then proceeded to dive all the way into being a parent and a mom and making that my entire identity, and serving in my church and making that my entire identity. And there wasn't really a lot of me left to think about anything, really. And so I think that just made it really easy for me to do all the things that I expected of myself and that my community expected of me without actually having to encounter any parts of myself. Sorry, that feels crazy to say out loud, but that was 1000% true. And then shortly after I kind of realized that Christianity had been my sorting hat, I started to undo some other things that had been existing in my heart and as frameworks. And one of them was I realized, I think it was around this time. I think that timeline was its own. But then, as I'm like learning and growing and losing weight and becoming more myself, okay, sorry, 1 second. So in that season and in that vein of me like growing and learning more about myself and starting to have my own thoughts and all of that, losing weight and just becoming myself again, I was at Barnes & Noble with my kids, and I picked up this book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And I started reading it, and I was like, this is incredible. This whole paradigm is awesome. And I really, really loved it because it really fit into a lot of the things that I knew to be biblical truths. Like, remember, I've been a Christian for 20 years. I've been reading the Bible, going to Bible studies. Like, the best Christian that I could physically possibly be was what I was seeking constantly. And so I was very familiar with the Bible and with like biblical verses and all of that. So as I'm reading, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a biblical concept just now, like extrapolated, I guess, or like expressed in a scientific concept. And so I kept reading and it started making a lot of sense and it was really interesting. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is really, really interesting. And so, one of the things that book had mentioned was a meditation, I think, or an exercise about being able to call up joy in your own heart. And so I went and I looked up that exercise and I did that exercise and it was really interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it's a meditation. So like I don't know, you lay down, you close your eyes, you do some deep breathing, you kind of come into your body, you feel your body become aware. And then you bring up a memory where you experienced pure joy. Now, first of all, that was way harder than it should have been. I really struggled and had to kind of pick through my memories to figure out, like, when was the last time I felt just pure joy? And then as soon as I did that, I felt the closest thing that I can feel that I remember is that prayer that I said way long ago when I was 11 and I felt that spiritual shift. Well, as soon as I did this exercise where I recalled joy and I experienced joy like literally from my own memory as a choice, I felt this shift and it felt so good. It was crazy. And I was like, whoa, that was kind of trippy. And I turned off the meditation. I went to sleep, had the best sleep of my life, and woke up and was like, wow, that was really something. That was really interesting. Okay, less than 24 hours later, I got the craziest bout of vertigo for like 4 days. And it was intense. And I thought, okay, I've like been working out and stuff. Maybe I like moved a certain way and those little crystals in my ear got like lodged out of place because it wasn't really going away. And I don't know if you know this, I'm a person who, when I am sick, that becomes my whole new entire identity for the rest of forever. Like, what do you mean I'm going to heal? No, this is who I am forever now. This is a theme of my life is I arrive at something and then I stay in it way longer than I should. And I think that it's going to last forever. That's not life. But yeah, so I got vertigo and I was like, oh my goodness, it's been like, I think I had like a full day of it, and then I went to bed, and when I woke up feeling the same way, I was like, oh my goodness, it's never gonna leave. And so I started panicking. I looked up, I was like, okay, maybe my crystals got out of whack, I'll go fix my crystals. So I did that exercise to try to get the crystals back into the part of your ear where they're supposed to go, and lo and behold, it did absolutely nothing but make me feel even worse. And I was like, well, that was not helpful, but I heard you had to do it a couple times, so stubbornly I did it a couple times, and every time it made me vomit, and it was not great. And then eventually, like, it dissolved and it went away. But I remember thinking, that's really weird timing. Right after I did that exercise and I felt something like shift, that's really weird. That's really weird. And then I was like, well, whatever. People get sick. I guess maybe that might. And that same week, my littlest also got impetigo. It was also a huge shift. Oh my goodness, I didn't even talk about that. It was also a huge shift because my kids were all being enrolled in public school that same week as well, which was an entirely different spiritual journey where I really had to, I guess that's part of the whole thing, but I had to learn that I'm not who I thought I was. That is a hard realization to learn. And so yeah, all my kids were going to public school. My boys were supposed to be starting public school that week and they were unable to. My son was sick. My middle son, I think, just had like a cold, and then my littlest got impetigo, which was wild and graphic. And it was in that same vein that my littlest had impetigo that I had my crazy vertigo, and it just, it was a really intense week, spiritually, emotionally. I had to like grieve and feel like I had failed as a mom because I couldn't do mom on hard mode anymore. I was drowning and so were my kids. And so I had to kind of not sacrifice, but give up who I thought I was and give up this journey that I had committed to. I thought that we were going to homeschool until all my kids had graduated and moved away like a lot of my friends did. And that was just not our reality. That was not what was best for us. And yeah, so that happened, and that happened on the tail of like a very emotionally difficult Christmas. So they started public school in the middle of the year because we literally could not wait 6 more months. This is that semester, by the way. We are now coming to the end of that semester where they started public school. So yeah, so I got that crazy crazy vertigo, and remember thinking like, well, that was weird. And then it was around this time that my kids started going to school, and I felt like I could start like waking up and being myself again. And immediately I learned, I think this was where sorry, everything's kind of out of order. It was kind of a journey. Immediately I learned that I had been in survival mode for who knows how long. And not just, I guess the only way that you are in survival mode is in your nervous system. My nervous system was in survival mode at least as long as my parenting, maybe as long as my childhood, I don't know. And so I felt the urge to rush and go do things, because that was part of the reason why I put my kids in school, so I could work and yada yada. But I also felt like that's going to be very dangerous. I need to wait, and I need to figure out what's happening in my body and what's happening in my spiritual journey, and figure out how to heal my nervous system that thinks that everything is on fire all the time. And so I took I've taken the entire semester to really like sit with that and learn what that looks like, and create new habits around taking care of my body and my nervous system and my thoughts. And in doing that, once my body started to feel safe, I think, then all these other shifts started happening, like all of these thoughts that I had suppressed, all of this healing that really probably should have happened earlier in my life, but was kind of postponed because I started a family, is now happening in real time with, in the presence of my family and everything. And so I'm learning all these things about myself, and I'm having to face all of these healing moments that I was not ready for and that I didn't really ask for, but here they are, because apparently that's what happens when you start telling your body that it's safe. Then what I've been teaching my kids is, as I've been learning, it's like you have all these unopened emails in your body, like your body brain, the part of your brain that lives in your body has been like holding all of this and has been trying to tell you in like 1,000 different ways. But as long as you keep yourself in fight or flight, there's no room, because you're in survival mode. There's no room to have these thoughts. And then plus I was shutting them down with, my theology. And so now that everything feels safer and calmer and there's more space, all of these things are bubbling up and showing up. And I'm like, oh wow, these are all things that I don't really want to acknowledge about myself, or the choices that I've made. Because of course, like, you're not operating at your best self as you're suppressing your intuition and all of your healing and all of your original thoughts. Life is happening as all of that is happening, and you're probably not making the best choices for yourself or your family. And so now I'm at a place. So in the midst of all of that was when I decided, I guess that was probably earlier on, right? Like April. So my kids started in January. I took a couple months to kind of like breathe and get my nervous system, figure out what it meant to take care of my nervous system. And then April was when I started posting, and like within like a few posts, I had one post start to go like, not viral, but like get way more traction than I was ready for, and like gained me like hundreds of followers. And I was like, I'm not actually sure what I want to do. So I told my husband, I panicked and I ran, because that is also what I do, and wanted to hide. And I told my husband, like, well, what do I do about it? He's like, isn't this kind of what you wanted? I was like, yeah, but I didn't expect it to show up. Like, I thought I was gonna like figure it out as I went. And he was like, then do that. I was like, I can't. Now there's people watching. Now there's people watching, and now I have to look like I know what I'm doing. And he's like, I don't think that's how that works. I'm like, no, for sure, that is how it works. And so I chose a very polished path and plan, and was like, okay, well, this is where the niche that I chose was marriage and relationships, so this is what I'm doing. Okay, I hate that, respectfully. I mean, I don't hate marriage. I love marriage. I love relationships. But then as I like started doing the work and like looking around at other people in my market, I'm like, I have no interest in doing what these people are doing. They're doing it amazingly, a million times better than I ever will. And it's not that I don't have wisdom to share in this area. I definitely think that I do, but it's not my passion. And I have so many passions. Why would I pursue something that I'm actually not passionate about? So as I was, doing all of this, and then I started, running in that direction. I was like, okay, and I got to make my digital product, and then I'm going to make a course, and then I'm going to and I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. And it just all felt wrong. And immediately once I chose it, my intuition, which has been silent for a long time, but is now finally speaking, went, this feels wrong. You're trapping yourself. Why are you doing that? And I went, because this feels safer than not knowing what I'm doing. And in true self-abandonment form, I said, well, forget you, intuition. I'm going to do it anyway. And I did. And then it took a while for me to be like, I hate this. I don't like what I'm doing. And like, it's such like low stakes. I don't have 1,000 followers yet. Like, just do what I should actually be doing, which apparently is sharing this crazy journey, because I am such a transparent person. Okay, one of the things that we loved about the church that we went to, that was like the closest to Christian perfection that we could find, was the transparency of that church. Like, we walked in, and my husband and I are extremely transparent people, and it felt so normal. Like, everybody was like, have you been here before? Like, why do you like fit the vibe already? And I think a part of that is just because we're very transparent. We will talk about anything and everything. We are not shy, which is also why I feel like this is a good path for me, because I mean, he doesn't really care. He'll do whatever I ask him to, but he's not passionate about it. But I am, and I'm a yapper, and I'm an external processor. And if I know from my own past that as I'm learning, I often bring others along with me, unplanned, and not trying to, but just kind of happens. And so basically, it just became, am I brave enough to do it out loud? And for a while, it felt like, no, I'm not brave enough. And I had a lot of work to do. And it's been, like I said, like all these spiritual things and realizations are just sort of like popping up, and I'm having to face them in real time, which I would like to do here with you, because I don't think that I'm alone in this. And I think that it's really important for, I always think it's really important for women to be in community with each other. And this is something that I'm figuring out in real time, and maybe there's other women going through it too. And I know that once I figured out that I'm not fully identifying with Christianity the same way that I was, I didn't even like kind of close that part, but I still believe in the Bible very much. I just think that the way that most modern churches teach it is not a way that I like agree with or experience. So I'm not at all like against Christianity. I can't, like, I feel like I've opened Pandora's box, and there's not a chance that I can go back to the brand of Christianity that I was following that was breeding shame and self-abandonment and guilt, like to the levels that it was. Like, I literally couldn't be myself. I couldn't pursue the things that I wanted to pursue. I couldn't breathe. Like, I was having such a hard time. And so now that I'm distancing myself from that and feeling the healing that's coming from that, and feeling the like coming back into myself from that, I can't go back. But it's also very alienating, I guess, lonely maybe. I've come up against again and again, like, the church has been my community. Not just the church, but also my homeschooling community has been my community, like a very deep community for the entirety of my adulthood. Like, remember, I like from 20 to now I'm 34. That has been my community. I really, like, I have family that I love that kind of had our ups and downs. We're in a good place right now, but they're far. So I don't have like a community where I can like share all of this. And I share it with my family, and they're loving and open and listen fantastically. But but when, I mean, they are like, great mom, cool. There's only so much, and I don't know that they're resonating on the same level that some of you might. So that's why I feel like it's important to share out loud, even though I may upset some people. I hope not. I don't anticipate it. I think my community is pretty solid. I do, but anyway, it's gonna be fine. But I do feel like this is an important lesson to live out loud. And why not? Why not? I already kind of have an idea of where I want to go and like what I hope that will come of this, but I've also learned that I don't know anything at all, actually, and I'm having to relearn everything. So I'm just going to let that exist out there in my brain, and instead I'm just going to try to show up every day and be really honest. I saw a creator, sorry, I know I'm running long here. I saw a creator the other day say, like, one of the best spiritual practices is just showing up online and saying what is true. And I feel that, like, I have learned so much, even in like this ridiculous little baby Instagram journey, about all of the emotions that it calls up, all of the things that it teaches you about yourself, because you're experiencing it like on a greater scale, at least in your own brain, even if it's not actually in front of a lot of people. Like, you're learning your patterns and you can't really deny them because you're watching them happen in real time. And so it's a great learning ground for who you are and who you thought you were and who you want to be. I know who I want to be, and I want to pursue that. But I also want to build a community with maybe other people, other women especially, who maybe are having some of those first like rumblings of thoughts that I had a year ago that I was afraid to acknowledge and look at too closely. This is just a safe place for you. I know I'm not the original person. I have been finding my community more and more the longer that I find myself here. But I also know that members of a community matter, and you're going to identify with certain members more than others. And if you identify with this story, or if you find hope and wisdom here, then I would love for you to stay, and I would love to walk with you. And sorry about all of that, the marriage coaching nonsense. I mean, I still, like I said, would love to talk about that, and that has kind of been a part of my story anyways, is relationships and the study of relationships, and even conversations about intimacy is like a huge passion of mine, but isn't all that I am, or like the entirety of what I want to pursue. So thank you for being here. If you listen to this whole thing, you're a champion. Leave your thoughts below, why you're here, what intrigues you about the story. And if you are on a similar journey, maybe share a little bit about that, and I'll be reading your comments and responding. So happy Tuesday, and I will see you soon.